In this episode of the Range Minded Podcast, we're going to dive into something that's been getting a lot of, let's just say, publicity lately, especially over the last few weeks. We're going to talk about 3D printing, how it fits in the gun community, and we're going to kind of dive into maybe some of the challenges that come along with it, whether it be legal or ethical, or maybe even some of the safety challenges that are associated with firearms and 3D printing. But of course, we're going to wrap it all back into a nice 2A present, and I'm going to gift it to you for this new year. Anyways, I hope you enjoy this episode of the Range Minded Podcast. Episode 264. I'm so excited, I can't even spit it out. Episode 264, the printer Go Brrrrrrr. Hope you enjoy this episode of the Range Minded Podcast. All right, like I mentioned in the intro, excuse me, we're going to talk about 3D printing. Now, 3D printing has really been in the forefront over the last few weeks, especially after Mr. Spaghetti shot insurance dude in the back.
Oh my God!
Which I consider murder. I don't know what it's called in your state, but it would be murder in my state. So 3D printing has obviously been a fear for the ATF and gained a lot of excitement and traction on the Pro 2A side. But in order to really understand what we're talking about and how it's relevant to the Second Amendment, let's talk about what is 3D printing on the most basic level. So 3D printing is called additive manufacturing. So what that means is, just like what the word says, we're adding to it. So these folks that design these models, they render these models in a 3D form on the computer. It's a file. Now, there's lots of software that does that for you. Once this software file is created, obviously it's imported to the machine. Now, what you normally see as a 3D printer, what's available to most folks, is usually these spools of a plastic that you can put in the machine, and it heats up this plastic and extrudes it to create a physical model of the 3D rendering that is there. Pretty simple. The awesome thing is there's more to 3D printing than just a spool of filament and a hot tip in a machine. There's powdered metals out there now, like a pulverized metal that uses a laser that heats up the powder in a certain position and creates layers upon layers of a metal creation, which is amazing to me. There's resin printers, which you put just what it sounds like, liquid in a vat, and then as the laser rolls around and heats up this resin, it cooks it in a shape, and the shape slowly gets pulled out of that vat of resin. It's pretty amazing. And there's a lot of industrial uses, as you might imagine, when it comes to 3D printing. In the 2A world, it's fantastic. There's so many options. Now, you can imagine over the years, now these metal printers, which I mentioned earlier, they're extremely expensive. They're out of reach for probably 99% of the public in the United States. I had a chance to go through Primary Weapons. They have their suppressor, which is a pass-through design, and it is metal 3D printed, and it is awesome. I believe it's titanium that they're 3D printing these pass-through suppressors. Absolutely amazing. Huxworks is very similar as well. They're using metal to 3D print these cans that are coming on the market. It's awesome. But like I said, most people cannot afford a metal 3D printer. But thankfully, this technology has been around since, I believe, the 80s. So it's been used a lot, especially in some of the more technical manufacturing in the world. But because technology is awesome, things get streamlined, things get cheaper, these machines become more available to the everyday man or woman, whatever you wish.
It is man.
Just like at work, I'm partners in a plastics company, and we have a 3D printer. It's awesome. And I don't really know how to write some of these files, but there's so many files available online, plus the availability of these printers have made it extremely desirable for just the normal dude to create parts that are broken, not just on firearms or whatever it may be. 3D printing is amazing, and it's a technology that's not going to go anywhere, especially now that that Pandora's box has been opened and millions of printers are in the public's hands. So outside of the 2A realm, 3D printers hold an important part in the world's society now. It's a pretty amazing technology, and if you don't believe me that some of these things are incredibly affordable, just jump online and look and see what a small, not an industrial size printer, but something smaller like a Bamboo Labs. That's what we have at work. They're not as expensive as you might think. They can be expensive. They might be out of reach for most folks, but there's other manufacturers out there making these printers for very, very reasonable prices. So pretty interesting. Let's talk a little bit how 3D printing is being used in the 2A space. First, let's jump to the commercial side of things. I don't know if you guys seen Brandon Herrera's video about him creating the AK-50. Cool set of videos. If you don't like Brandon Herrera, I don't know what to tell you. But in the commercial sense of 3D printing, it is a massive savings for these companies. Instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars on a mold that they don't know is going to work properly, now they can 3D print a product or a part in a matter of hours or minutes in some cases, and saving them tons of money. It's a huge benefit for these large companies to have 3D printing available. Now let's jump to the consumer side. It's a lot of the same things. Now, a consumer, I've seen 3D files for 1911 grips. I've seen, well, let's look at this. I've made a few things the other day. Actually, I mentioned I have a printer at work. Now, this is a ridiculously oversized, can you see it? A ridiculously oversized magwell for a polymer 80, which I have a P80 serialized, just so you know. But I found this file online. Somebody went to the work of creating one, and I liked how ridiculously huge it was. So I decided to print it. Or here's a smaller magwell for I think this is for a 43X. I thought it said 43. That's what I carry, so I printed it. Obviously, it doesn't fit on my 43. But nonetheless, there are folks that have taken the time to create files to make it very accessible for idiots like myself to just download off the interwebs and create something. Plus, there are so many color options and filament options, honestly. This is PETG, which is a little bit stronger filament from what I understand. I am not a genius when it comes to 3D printing, mind you.
I'm an idiot. You're an idiot.
But there are so many other plastic compounds that you can get to run through the nozzle of extruded plastic. So as a consumer, you can print frames. Obviously, those are out there. I personally have no desire to print a frame for a Glock or anything like that. I have no desire to do that personally. If you want to, I'm totally cool with it. Like I say, I found some 1911 grips the other day as a free file online. I thought that was kind of neat. I've seen 3D printed sights, magwells, not just for handguns, but for AR-15s. I saw a winter trigger guard for an AR-15 as well. These files are everywhere, and a lot of them are free. But when you get to the point of actually purchasing files, they tend to be a better file, more detailed, and I don't know, there's just a lot of cool stuff available. So both between the commercial side, creating parts that they don't know will work, saving them a ton of money and a ton of time, that in itself is awesome. But on the consumer side, being able to print things like a ridiculously huge magwell in a matter of, I think if this took an hour and a half, something like that, cheaper than me going to the store and finding a big fat ugly magwell, I just 3D print my own. It's pretty awesome. I also, same thing, PETG. I also printed some, these are some magazine followers for Magpul mags. I wanted to try something a little different with a different caliber, so instead of me going to try and find a magazine that's going to cost me a fortune, I just printed these off for not much at all. It took time, so that's involved there, but it's pretty simple. and pretty straightforward, especially once you start to understand how the files work, how to make it work on the plate, how to slice the plate. I know if you haven't 3D printed, none of this makes sense. And then run that through the printer. It's actually very easy, especially if you get a good program and a good printer to make that happen. So I don't think printing is going to go anywhere. I think 3D printing is going to be a part of the firearms community from now until whenever, till the world ends, for all I know. Who knows? Or the power goes out. I guess there's that too. So we talked a little bit about what 3D printing is at a real basic level. We talked about how it's being incorporated now in the two-way space. But what about the future? What are some of the possibilities that 3D printing and firearms can bring to the table? Well, first and foremost is the ability to create a firearm that fits your hand perfectly. Think about it. A consumer, you, Joe Schmo out there, maybe you have weird shaped hands. Maybe they're really small. Maybe they're really big. I don't know. But the ability for you to create a file that allows you to get the perfect grip for your hands. Pretty awesome. At a fairly reasonable cost. Or, as we talked about earlier, just prototyping things. Pretty awesome. The future is super bright when it comes to 3D printing. And as the future unfolds and the process gets refined and plastics or metals become easier to print, the process is only going to get better. So in my perspective, when it comes to 3D printing and the future of guns, they go hand in hand, they coalesce. It's exciting to see what could happen or think about what could happen in the future when we marry 3D printing and the firearms technology. The sky literally is the limit. Here's something else to consider when it comes to 3D printing and the two-way space. 3D printers decentralize the manufacturing process. I mean, it takes away some of the burden from these big manufacturers, especially if there's some sort of supply chain issue or people in rural areas just have for some reason, the inability to keep and bear arms. 3D printing makes that more available to more people throughout the United States and honestly the world. Now, you might look at it as a benefit, but obviously some folks look at it as a huge loss to freedom or to safety. Let's put it that way. Because there is that caveat. Some people exercise this right for lawful purposes, but there are an element of people out there that may think this possible for a way to skirt some laws that already exist. Now, I am a two-way absolutist. I want to bring this, and many of you guys know this already. I believe that every person has the right to keep and bear arms, even felons, as long as they have paid their debt to society. If they are unable to, if the government says that no, they shouldn't have a gun because they're violent, then they shouldn't be walking the streets. They should be in jail. If you've paid your debt to society, I believe that should be it. That's over. You can have your firearms rights restored to you. That makes sense to me. I know some of you may differ. That's okay. We can have that conversation at a later time. But 3D printing makes it more available for folks, even maybe some of those that have some financial burdens. I know some of these printers cost, thousands of dollars. I get that. But maybe they don't buy the printer, but they have somebody print that for them. I know that might be a felony in some cases. I'm not suggesting that's the behavior that should be taken in any way, sense, or form. But the possibility is there that those that can't afford to deal with the tax that's on the Second Amendment, right? That exists, it's there. This is a way for them to be able to afford a way to protect themselves and their property and their families. So there's always good and bad. There's always two sides to that coin. Yes, it makes it more accessible for folks to defend themselves. Yes, it also makes it more accessible for criminals to do nefarious things. But they're breaking the law, right? These people that are already nefarious, if they have the intent, they're going to do whatever it takes to cause harm. So in reality, the printer has nothing to do with that. Along with the advancement of making it more accessible to folks that maybe have some kind of a cost prohibition, as this technology advances, and especially when it comes to metal 3D printing, think of the possibilities that we'll have for future firearms. It'll become less expensive for a manufacturer to create more intricate things and to bring those to market. So as the technology advances, yes, it's a benefit to the consumer or the hobbyist printer, but it's also a huge net gain for the manufacturing in the 2A space as well. And things are only going to get better, right? Technology is only going to get better, I think. I don't know. Maybe it'll be like the Egyptians, right? No, we're not going to get into that. Things are only going to get better, faster, and stronger, especially the components of 3D printing in the category of metal printing. I'm excited to see what the future brings. And like I say, we could get some really cool, ornate, strong metal prints out there that hopefully will bring down the cost of firearms manufacturing and make guns cheap again. We'll see. But nonetheless, with technology improving or with the accessibility for the common man to create something to keep his family safe, all of this is a net gain for the Second Amendment. All of this comes together and boons up our constitutional right to keep and bear arms. It fortifies that right. It takes away some of the control of a tyrannical government by suppressing rights, by taking guns away, buybacks, or what have you. 3D printing allows the citizen to fight against laws that are unjust and anti-constitutional. I don't see 3D printing going anywhere. I only seeing it improving. I only see files getting better. Just like we talked about, technology is improving when it comes to metal printing. Things are going to get fantastic. Just wait and see. All right, so talking about the benefits of 3D printing, the awesomeness of the future when it comes to 3D printing, it's hard to ignore the 500-pound gorilla. Now, that's some of the controversies associated with 3D printing. Yes, there's a benefit for the people to keep and bear arms, but there are some concerns as well. We just mentioned a little bit earlier about felons being able to access guns, prohibited persons, I should say, from accessing, if I can say that, firearms, and the ability to produce these guns on demand. Now, we got to understand when we're talking about this, these 3D files for frames and receivers are not geofenced into the United States. They are worldwide, and no other country has the desire to keep and bear arms, the God-given right to keep and bear arms, as written and spelled out in their Constitution like we do in our Bill of Rights. So there's an issue there when we think of outside of the United States. These files are usually uploaded anonymously online and accessible to anyone. And even if these countries put some sort of a digital block, there's always a workaround for these files to be shared worldwide. So there's a concern among these countries. I'm not saying I'm necessarily concerned about it, but the concern among the anti-gunners and these anti-gun nations is these people are producing prohibited firearms, illegal firearms, and it's an issue for the safety of the public. I mean, think about all the anti-gun stuff that we hear on a daily basis in the United States. That's how other countries really view firearms as well. So there's that issue. Now, another issue that doesn't really get talked about much is the safety side of these firearms. I have heard of issues of folks 3D printing suppressors, thinking that, well, filament is filament, I'll just print these, whatever, having no understanding of basic firearm knowledge and how, the barrel gets pressurized and pushes the projectile behind, the pressures behind the projectile pushes it down the barrel. Well, what happens when that pressure exits the barrel? You're going to have a plastic grenade on the end of your gun. And I've heard of horror stories of 3D printed suppressors. I don't know anybody that does it personally, honestly.
FBI, open up!
I'm not lying to you about that, but I have heard stories of 3D printed suppressors shattering or grenading on the ends of these rifles. So there's a safety concern there. Now, when it comes to frames or receivers, the exact same thing. We have a controlled explosion above or within this receiver, and if folks don't understand wall thickness, how the layering process works, using the correct plastic or polymer to be extruded to create this frame, so there are some issues there that could create injury. So there's some safety concerns there. What was it? The Liberator pistol. I mean, that was designed to only have to fire so many rounds before it would just break and explode in some cases. Polymers aren't designed for high pressures, especially for things like barrels or chambers or that kind of thing. So thinking you can buy the highest pressure, highest temp plastic and 3D print a barrel, that's probably not a wise idea. You can see how that might be a concern for folks. Now, finally, the last concern of something we already touched on is more the ethical side. Yes, 3D printing or 3D printers make it more accessible for folks to keep and bear arms and defend themselves and their property. But again, it also makes it more accessible for those who shouldn't have or prohibited persons to gain possession of something like this. But nonetheless, the bad does not even come close to outweighing the good. 3D printers, 3D printing process, as far as the two-way space is concerned, makes firearms more accessible to free citizens in a free country to keep and bear arms and to defend themselves against some sort of tyrannical regime. I think, again, 3D printers are a gross benefit to the Second Amendment.
Now a word from our sponsors.
Just kidding. I don't have a sponsor for this show. No, for the past nearly 7 years, I've been doing this on my own dime, scraping and crawling upon the ground with my bloodied fingertips. No, while others have those fancy boxes full of tactical things, or maybe a sponsorship from a large online gunsmithing academy. Nope, not this guy. But if you want to support the show, dude, I would be absolutely appreciative. Probably the best way to do that right now is to jump on the website, rangemindedpodcast.com, and order some patches. And they get shipped right to your house. It's all good. There'll be more patches to come. I am a patch whore. If you notice back there, I love patches. Patches are like my little comfort animal. Anyways, you also can help out the show by liking and sharing any of our content. I would totally appreciate it. It helps me out. It's free for you, and it's all good. Anyway, let's get back to the show. Peace. As we think about the benefits and the concerns of the 3D printing in the two-way space, how do we balance that out? How do we come together and agree upon something which is definitely controversial and also exciting and fun and some of the crazy things that you can print out to defend yourself online? So what do? How do we compromise? Well, obviously, people need to educate themselves with whatever their local jurisdictional laws are concerning firearms, especially homemade firearms. Now, in the United States, last I checked, it is still legal for you to create a firearm in your own home as long as you're not producing and selling. That would make you a manufacturer. But if you're creating your own gun for yourself, for your personal use, that is not illegal. But there might be some state rules. Think about our friend Dexter Taylor, who was exercising that very right, which ended up costing him 10 years in prison. So we got to be able to understand and interpret and dive into our local laws regarding firearms possession, firearms manufacturing. I would say that somehow the lawmakers have to have a role in this as well. I don't want to say that they need to create a framework to create some sort of template when it comes to building your guns yourself in your home, 3D printing your guns. Honestly, it's none of the government's business, in my opinion. But there has to be some kind of responsibility if somebody's 3D printing and sending those guns out. Honestly, those laws do exist, and the ATF has the mechanism to prosecute those who are illegally manufacturing and distributing firearms without a license. Those rules already exist. So why can't those rules be incorporated into the 3D printing space for somebody who's doing something illegal, going against state or federal laws when it comes to 2A 3D printing? Boy, that sounds kind of weird. 2A 3D printing. I think you get what I'm trying to say. Again, education is key. When it boils down to it, 3D printing is just a rendering of the manufacturing process. So if you want to go to that space, if you feel like that's something that you want to exercise, learn about the manufacturing process, learn about the different filaments that can be used, the different kind of plastics that can be used to tolerate certain stresses, especially when it comes to frames and receivers. It's fun. It's not that hard to do, but knowledge is obviously power. And when we come to the 3D printer to create something, we want to make sure that whatever we're creating has the right filament being used to tolerate whatever kind of pressures or things that it's going to be put up against. It's just part of the manufacturing process. It should be easy. And honestly, like I said, it's kind of fun to learn this stuff. It's just kind of cool. Plus, the Second Amendment does not just stop at arms that exist already. In my opinion, the Second Amendment still encompasses whatever arms you could create. There's knife makers out there that create knives, right? There's other, back in the day, gunsmiths were just everyday people that would create a firearm and they'd sell it. The Second Amendment should cover that innovation for self-preservation, for the right to keep and bear any kind of arm, right? It doesn't just focus on the gun. It focuses in on everything, or I should say it encompasses everything that you could carry as a defensive tool. Okay, think of the Militia Act. I think of 1787, I think it was, when it said an arm is anything for the use of offense or defense, and that all people were meant to carry arms for their safety and defense for themselves, their property, or in that case, their country. So I do believe that the Second Amendment encompasses 3D printing when it comes to defensive life-saving tools. My dogs are barking. I don't know if you can hear them. Had to pause for a second. So why does this matter for the Second Amendment community? What's so important about 3D printing? Well, like I just mentioned, it encompasses the spirit of the Second Amendment. Innovation has always been part of the American spirit since the beginning of those who even came across to colonize, right? Innovation was a part of it because we had to adapt and we had to overcome. So 3D printing really embodies the Second Amendment. It brings it to the forefront now, which allows us to innovate and find new ways, more cost-effective ways, faster ways to create arms to keep us in defense. It truly is an amazing thing. And I hope as you start thinking about 3D printing and the role it plays in our freedom, it should really start to come together for you. And you start to see, hey, this is actually a really cool technology, and there is a gross benefit for my freedom, my neighbor's freedom, and the freedom of this whole country. It's pretty rad. And honestly, as the 3D printing process becomes more efficient, cleaner, faster, better, it only improves the community that we live in anyways. We should be embracing this technology if we're pro 2A. We should be looking at it as an opportunity to learn and to grow and to come closer as a country. It allows us to be more free as long as we understand that process. Now, because we'll see it that way, there's going to be opposition to it. So we have to learn how to fight for these rights, to keep the right to be able to create our own firearms, to 3D print. There's already states, I think California has already created some sort of law to restrict 3D printing altogether or to tax it or something. I haven't looked into it. That was just some rumors I'd heard recently. It's kind of sad. It's rather frustrating. And we know that tyranny will find any way to stop the public from doing public things. So think about that. As we've talked about this today, we've kind of looked into how 3D printing fits into the 2A space. I think it's important for us to really think about how this is going to carry on into the future. It's up to us to create this framework on how 3D printing is going to benefit us later on. And we really need to consider that, especially in the 2A space. I think it's more important than what most people think, that it gives us the ability to develop arms for defense of ourselves and our loved ones. It's pretty amazing. Yes, this technology will be used for good and bad things. Bad people are going to do bad things no matter what. They'll use any way, any avenue, any ability, any tool to create harm if that's what they want to do. But on contrast, it allows us, those who want to be protectors, those who feel like they should be able to defend themselves, it gives us the innovation and us a way to have tools and create tools to defend ourselves from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Look, whether you're a manufacturer or a hobbyist or just somebody who might just be getting interested in this kind of technology, 3D printing has a vast and unlimited potential and future. And it's worth understanding this technology, especially how it fits in our freedoms. Outside of the 2A space, the ability to create things is something that's been a part of the United States forever. So don't discount 3D printing. Learn about it, understand it. If you want to experiment with it, like I said, some printers are rather affordable, more affordable than you might think. And it's fun even to create stupid little toys or whatever out of it. It's a ton of fun. And the process is only going to get better. The process is only going to get faster, stronger, better. Right? Kind of like, what was that? Never mind. I'm old. Old enough to not remember what that TV show was called. $1 Million Man.
Better, stronger, faster.
Is that what it's called? Yeah, sure. Lee Majors, whatever. We don't care. We're past that. It's awesome. Please think about this. We've talked a lot, the last 30 so minutes, we've talked about how 3D printing is viable, how it's relevant today, and how it's going to be relevant in the future. Hopefully it gives you a chance to think about it. Maybe you've been thinking about getting a 3D printer and this has convinced you to lean into that technology a little more. It is a lot of fun. I have printed more than just these little gun parts that I probably won't put on a gun anyways. I've printed measuring cups and funnels and all sorts of things. Honestly, at work, I mentioned that we have a 3D print at work. I have created car parts to go into performance vehicles. It's an amazing technology with unlimited potential. Hopefully you put your mind around it. Think about it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe there's something that we should talk about relevant to 3D printing. Put it down in the comments. I would love to hear from you about this subject. I think it's cool. I do want to get one. My wife says, no, I'm not buying one of those stupid things. She doesn't really sound like that, but she kind of does too. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode. Stay positive. I mean, look, the new year is coming up. The new year is happening. So hopefully we'll talk about resolutions later. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Thanks for hanging out on the Range Minded Podcast. I truly appreciate you. Don't forget to like and share this content. If it's something you liked, it's free. You just hit that little stupid thumbs up button. It doesn't cost you a dime. Honestly, it does help the show. It helps me increase my reach. I have been doing this for almost 7 years, and a lot of people have no idea who we are. So it'd be awesome. 2025 is going to be our year. Gosh, my nose itches. No, I'm not doing any booger sugar or nothing. My nose just, I must have. Oh. Thanks a lot, Joe Biden. Anyways, peace out, guys. Have fun. Don't forget you got to take somebody shooting. And hey, stay range-minded. See you guys.